Welcome, everyone, to the Union Federation podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network, where we discuss both Star Trek and the Orville. We are on episode 135, and we are discussing the Orville for this episode. New Horizons, Season 3, Gently Falling Rain. My name is Kevin, and I'm going to be your captain. I'd like to introduce our crew for this Union Federation starship. I'd like to introduce my co-captain, acting security officer, and also the understudy for Daddy Warbucks in the Orville play of Annie. Welcome, Mr. Kyle Wagner. How are you?
Excuse me, sir. Do you have something in a mid-size? I prefer Apple car care in it. Things like that. Oh wait. Sorry. I knew Avis was part of this episode. I thought I was going to get a free rental. I apologize. It is great to be here to talk about the Orville. We have quite the episode to talk about. Kevin, I'm just going to lead off and say it. I think it's my favorite episode so far this season.
Yes, we will discuss that, and probably inclined to agree with you. And after a hiatus for a while, but back with us, is our science officer, Haley Starr. Haley, how are you?
Well, partner, there's not enough room in this bar for the three of us, so one of you is gonna have to go. I'm doing well.
Now, our, I guess you could say Amy has a good reason for not being here. She, of course, is our ship's counselor. She is on vacation. And what's interesting is the time of this recording of this particular episode, I literally was just hanging out with her in person. She came from Las Vegas to visit some friends in Simi Valley, California. And her and her friends decided to come up and visit me in Santa Barbara for a quick train ride for the day. So I showed them around a little bit, did some wine tasting with her and her friends, went to the wharf and the pier. It was a lot of fun. And then I said I had to go, Amy, while you guys finish your wine tasting, because I have to go record a podcast that you should be on.
So wait. So what we're saying is rule number one, wine tasting falls higher on the list than podcasting for Amy.
Yes, it does. I can't blame her. We had some great wine tasting. It was great. I had to let them keep getting drunk. So,
so speaking of which, Haley, you talked about there's not room for three of us. I can tell you're drunk on this podcast.
All right, so guys,
if only I'm not allowed to partake at this moment. So
it was really nice to see Amy. It was Amy's first time visiting Santa Barbara, and it was nice that she could see my hometown. So she'll be joining us hopefully next week for Union Federation. But we are discussing the newest episode of Orville New Horizons. That is Gently Falling Rain. And just a little warning here, spoilers. We will be doing a deep dive because we have a lot to talk about. Yes, episode aired June 23rd. Episode is called Gently Falling Rain. And Haley, since you're back, do you want to read the captain's log synopsis?
I sure can, as soon as I actually open the correct notes, because
She's out of
I
practice,
apparently
ladies
did
and
not.
Sure.
Hey,
remember what I said about her being drunk before? No phaser button for you this week, Haley.
If you do, I could read it. It's no worries.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, all right. So the captain's log episode synopsis is: the crew is invited to escort a Union delegation to the Krill homeworld to sign a historic treaty between the two people. However, matters are complicated when Admiral Halsey reveals to Ed that Talea is running for Supreme Chancellor and has amassed a following thanks to her populist rhetoric. The delegation goes ahead when the incumbent chancellor is projected to win, but shortly after the delegation arrives, Talea stages a coup and seizes power, having the former chancellor killed. She also plans to kill the Union delegates, but makes arrangements for Ed to be released as repayment for his releasing her the prior year. However, a group of Krill who still support the alliance between the Union and the Krill intercept Ed and introduce him to Anaya, a half-human, half-Krill child that is revealed to be, dun dun dun, his and Talea's daughter. Ed confronts Talea, who refuses to reveal Anya out of fear of losing her following and her newfound power, and she returns him to the delegation to face execution. Before the delegates can be killed, however, Lamar and Claire arrive disguised as Krill and stage a rescue. The delegates are safely returned to the Orville and escape back to Earth. Though the peace treaty is now dead, Ed resolves to find some way to preserve the peace between the Union and the Krill to protect his daughter, even though he knows it's unlikely he'll never see her again. As the episode ends, Talea is seen watching Anya playing over a security feed. So guys, first reactions to this episode. Kyle.
Actually, I have a question for Haley before we get her first reactions, Kevin, if you don't mind.
Please
she hasn't been with us for a few weeks, and we've had a particular discussion about the Orville missing its fun in the last couple of episodes. So real quick, before I get your first reactions to this episode, Haley, I just kind of want to get a quick catch up for you on how you're feeling about this season of the Orville so far.
Yeah, it's definitely a little more adult, a little bit more mature. I was actually thinking that myself, where it's not as lighthearted and silly as it was. But I guess, if you come out of this big giant battle where Earth is almost completely destroyed and you've lost most of your fleet, yeah, it'd be a little more grown up, maybe, I guess. So I guess I can understand where they're coming from. I definitely am not a fan of jump scares. So 2 episodes ago was not my favorite, that's for sure. I mean, they already had the clown one season, and I hate clowns. And then it was a creepy clown, and the jump scare. Anyway, so it is kind of interesting that this is taken on a little bit more of a serious tone with some lighter stuff thrown in, but it's definitely way different. And I'm not sure what I think quite yet.
Okay, that's fair. So what did you think of this week's episode?
Well, this one was quite interesting, and you could definitely tell when they were writing and filming, because I have to say, even to now, that was completely on the nose and spot on with some stuff that's going on currently. Yeah. Like Star Trek does. Star Trek holds that mirror. This definitely, Orville's touched on that to a degree in some episodes prior, but this episode really was like, hey, look at your crazy fanatic, crazy people. Yeah, spot on.
Yeah.
Kyle.
I think for me, one, I really enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed getting a look at the Krill and kind of getting a little bit more inside look in their society. I love the look of the Krill City. I thought it was absolutely gorgeous. I actually there's a lot of little things that happened in this episode, and obviously we'll talk about Talea a little later and all the ramifications of the daughter and everything that's placed in that. But there's a lot of other little things here. We get to see Kelly in the captain's chair, and it's interesting to see her style versus Ed's. But there was a little something at the beginning too that kind of grabbed my attention when Lamar was kind of trying to put a little move on your favorite security officer there, Kevin.
Yeah, Lamar was flirting with Talia a little bit there. Yeah.
So I think
she's like, "Are you trying to tell me something, John?"
Yeah. And so that always that's something that bears watching. And I'm always happy to see Victor Garber show up on the Orville, because I really think he brings a little something extra as Admiral Halsey, and I thoroughly enjoy him, and I love how he kind of played. They gave him some good jokes in this, and this episode did have some fun, opening up with the holographic in the bar, Isaac walking in with the mustache and the hat. And then, of course, Kevin, I'm sorry, I misheard you. We're doing Operation 23 on this episode, not 21. So, when you start looking like a plant-like thing that sounds like Bruce Willis, I apologize.
Kyle, the fun did return in this episode. Most of it, of course, in the beginning, but that's okay. But the episode still stays grounded in a few serious themes that we'll discuss later. I love the fact that we open up with the Annie cast singing, Sun Will Come Out Tomorrow, and the Krill are there watching it. But was that Dan as Daddy Warbucks? Because it was the same species. Our favorite Dan, big head alien guy.
I don't think it
Is
was
that
Dan,
him?
but I think it was somebody from his. No, I think it was somebody else from his species.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, I guess I'm gonna think it's Dan until proven otherwise, because I thought that was kind of funny. I love the fact that their little holographic thing was the pub crawl through history.
It was a great idea.
Well,
That's hilarious.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I think that's great. I think great that someone came up with this, but I don't know where the first pub crawl started. I guess they were like, they decided to start with the Wild West there, but I think after the Wild West, I would be out.
What I want to know is I want to know more about these water wars, because Gordon's dad got all the way to the water wars, so fill me in here.
Okay, guys. So real quick, so we actually get to see what Avis looks like when they go to Krill. Did anyone else have the feeling it kind of reminded of when later in Harry Potter and they visit the Ministry of Magic after Voldemort has taken over, and it's like Slytherin green everywhere?
Yep. Yep.
Say that.
It's exactly what I was thinking, with like the hall like leading into the rotunda where all the offices split up, and it was like, oh,
Yep.
hey, look, it's the Ministry of Magic.
Yes. And I don't know if you guys realized, but I got my wish. What was it that I wanted to see after last season ended? I wanted to see Talea return. And she did. And not only did she return, she's got a daughter with Ed Mercer. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but I did want to mention that this episode. Oh, yeah, Haley?
No, go ahead. I'm going to give you some history.
Okay, cool. Well, this episode has connections to a few episodes. First of all, the season 1, episode 6, the Krill episode, the ones where Ed and Malloy go undercover and they first meet Talea and spare her. And then also when Ed, season 2, episode 4, is having that relationship with that lieutenant girl with the pretty hair. Turns out it's Talea in disguise, and then they get captured and they get on that planet and they have to work together. And that was the episode that Ed decides to release her before the treaty discussions start with the Krill. Have anything else to add, Haley?
Well, actually, I was curious, so I was looking at the history of pub crawls. Actually,
Oh yeah, what you got?
Yeah, so let's see. There's several different things. Wikipedia. I mean, it definitely started in the UK. It's definitely
Of course.
thing, and various other countries. But pub crawling looks like dates back to 1877.
Interesting. I thought it would have gone a
So,
longer way back.
I mean, there's a good possibility. Maybe they just had a different name for it.
Right.
But there's some interesting history there. I'm gonna have to dig a little bit more because that's my type of thing. I'm kind of curious. Speaking of which, there is a Santa themed pub crawl called SantaCon in San Francisco. Started in 1994.
Nice. In my hometown here, we have a main street called State Street, and it's the main street here in Santa Barbara, and it's also a big tourist attraction. But when you turn 21, there's called the State Street Pub Crawl, or the State Street Crawl. As you do, you have to hit one bar, and you have to try to make it up a certain block. I failed because I thought that drinking peppermint schnapps and Foster's beer together wouldn't be a problem, and I was wrong.
Do you not know the acronym? Beer before liquor, never sicker?
No, I learned that later. Yeah, I did drive the porcelain bus that night. It was nice. So yeah, we have some ties to previous episodes, and I got my wish. We got Talea back, and boy, did we get her back. And we'll have that discussion a little bit later. I want to talk about the cast, guys. First of all, it's directed by John Cassar again, and written by Brandon Braga and Andre Bormanis. And obviously, we've got our crew back here, but I want to highlight. our thoughts and impressions of guest stars and returning guest stars. And of course, what's really cool is like we get the Admiral's Row here, which I love. We get Admiral Ozawa, Kelly Hu. We also get Admiral Halsey back, Victor Garber. What's cool is he actually gets some moments with actually acting in the same scene and being threatened with the rest of them while they're on Krill. And we also get Ted Danson's Admiral back as well on video screen. And then, of course, we got Bruce Boxleitner as President Alcuzan, which I thought was really cool. Haley, what were your thoughts on the guest stars and returning guest stars? And just keep in mind, I want to save the discussion for Talea and Anya later. We'll discuss them.
Yes. No, super fun. I always love seeing Ted Danson. Admiral Perry is his name. It says it
Yes.
later.
Thank you.
And then, Admiral Halsey is always super fun also to see around. And it was nice to see Bruce, well, not really see Bruce Boxleitner, but he was there. And so,
Nice
yeah, it was
makeup
really
job
funny.
he had.
Yeah. And so that's always super, super fun. I always like when we get, especially Ted Danson. I mean, who doesn't like Ted Danson?
Yeah. Kyle, your thoughts on the returning guest stars and guest stars there?
Well, I just kind of said Victor Garber always showing up makes me happy. I love him as Admiral Halsey. I think he just has a fun energy as the Admiral. But
he knows when they're drunk.
Yeah, exactly. I like the fact that these guests, Ted Danson and Kelly Hu, aren't afraid to make comebacks to the Orville, and you know that something significant is going to happen when they show up, and that's always good. And then when you get all three of them in an episode, something.
I think it was Admiral Ozawa Kelly Hu was the one that wanted in that Krill episode Ed to infiltrate and do that secret mission, if I remember correctly.
Yes, exactly. The one where they go in disguise and trying to get more about the history of the Krill, because at that point they knew nothing. They had very little knowledge of the Krill. So, they're always great to have on, and it's so cool that they are willing to come back for episodes and do that, and not just do a one and done thing. And I think that's wonderful.
Haley, I wanted to ask you about our newest crew member. We haven't gotten your thoughts on Charlie. Obviously, she has problems with, Isaac, thank you. And that was highlighted very well. And she also had some moments in this episode. What are your thoughts on the new crew member?
I did share some shots. Wow. Yeah. Not been drinking.
Everybody's drunk on this podcast. The pub crawl is getting you.
When Kyle and I did podcasts, just the two of us, but she's still got a chip on her shoulder that's just it's not rubbing me as much as it was before, but she's also not got as much screen time as she was getting before. And so I don't know where I sit with her. I like that, apparently she's really good at her job, which is super fantastic, but still undetermined at this point right now.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Well, as always, I like to give a shout out to our Den of Geek fans. They always have great articles, and they have, of course, an article on this episode. The Orville New Horizons Season 3, Episode 4 review, Gently Falling Rain. New Horizons continue to pave a path for the Orville universe by having yet another loaded episode that teases many future payoffs. And this is by Michael Wynn Johnson, published on June 23rd, 2022. He goes on to say, good science fiction should challenge us. It should contain subtext that can teach, subvert, and even make us uncomfortable by shining a light on aspects of our world we don't want to look at. Whether it is the golden standard of this layered writing style, such as The Outer Limits, a legendary Twilight Zone, Black Mirror, these tiny vignettes of fiction are loaded with political subtext and important morals. This week's Gently Falling Rain, such like the Season 3 premiere of the Orville New Horizons, perhaps goes from subtextual to textual, but can definitely be considered one of the biggest episodes of the series in terms of scope, impact, and timeliness. Little did they know. The political message of Gently Falling Rain is clear from the first few minutes of the episodes. Writer Brandon Braga and Andre Bormanis create fairly obvious parallels to the recent surge of populist movements as well as militaristic coups using fear to tap into the ignorance of the voting public and the use of misinformation against one's political opponent. Throughout the episode, it is Talea's evil regime acting as a parallel for real-life reprehensible far-right tactics. As mentioned, the intention behind this episode is certainly admirable. The lesson behind recent events in elections all over the world and the terrifying prospect of losing the democracies that many sovereign nations have worked towards deserves our attention. Yet some of the major beats which are clearly meant to convey this subtext certainly lack subtlety. One particular scene, after Mercer is informed by Admiral Halsey, played by Victor Garber, as to Talea's rise in populist power, is extremely ham-fisted. Haley, I want to get your thoughts on this regarding what's happening with this political regime here and him calling it extremely ham-fisted. I mean, we know when this was written, probably around 2018, 19 and filmed in 2020, but then stuff started happening politically as well that we feel it's like, did they see the future?
Well, I almost wonder too, because yes, they had started filming, but did they rewrite part of the script? Maybe they already had this idea in their head of where they were going to go with it, but then because of what happened, I have to wonder, and I think that they might have just like changed the script a little bit, because we know what happens,
right?
To throw more of this in and make the story better. I mean, it's a possibility that this was exactly what it's supposed to be from the get-go, but I would posit that they probably switched it up a little bit, and it definitely was not settling as somebody who is left in political arenas. I immediately I was like, oh snap, they're like hitting it right on the head this time around, which I loved. I think it was great.
Kyle, what are your thoughts on this political mirrorness?
Well, okay, so Seth MacFarlane has always been pretty outspoken on his Twitter and very political on his Twitter, but not in a rude way or a in your face kind of way. But he's always talked very much political on his Twitter, so it doesn't surprise me with this. And let's face it, the Orville has hit on the nose more than once in several episodes throughout its run as far as political topics. But the good thing about the Orville is how it handles it. It never feels like it's just slamming you with a sledgehammer with the topic. They fit it into the story. And I even here, when it was certainly obvious, and obviously there's one part of it and that is very, very much on the nose because of very recent events. And of course, I don't think they saw that far into the future or change the script that quickly, but it definitely hits a lot more close to home. And I definitely was doing a little bit of whoa when I watched it. I kind of laugh because I'm almost going with the joke here. There's a lot of internet memes where the Simpsons is always being called out for predicting the future. And, the Orville's going to start getting those memes here very shortly.
Yeah,
at this point. But I think it was done in a classful way, but also a way that people, this is what's going on out there, and whether you agree with it or not, or disagree with it, they told it in a way within the aspect of the Krill that I think worked for this episode without slamming it on you.
Article goes on to say the major events of this episode expanded the universe in shattering ways as well. After Chancellor Curran was publicly executed only moments after allegedly losing the election, it appeared the same fate was to fall on the Union delegation. Before that, however, Mercer and Talea had a heart to cold Krill heart discussing their complicated love-hate relationship. There were some niceties, but ultimately the audience had to know they would never see eye to eye. With Talea's heart still filled with so much anger because of past events, the treaty would never be signed, which leaves the delegation in the Orville in orbit in real danger. What has been enjoyable about this season so far is so many of the episodes have set up storylines that will undoubtedly come to haunt the crew of the Orville. This episode, while thinking about the future and setting up darker story paths, also contains several heartfelt moments. Mercer having a daughter is a great story thread. Tala was promoted to lieutenant commander, and while celebrating her fellow senior officers, she and Lamar had an unexpected flirtatious moment. it'll be interesting to see how this could evolve in the future. This was, for the most part, a superbly well-acted episode with a well-balanced story, a story which has reshaped the fabric of the show and its main characters. While the writers could have found an iota of better balance, it's exciting to think of them playing, quote, the long game when it comes to the journey of the show. He gave it a rating 4 out of 5. The point that I liked that he said at the end here was thinking about the future and setting up darker story paths. And it feels like, and they're very smart, even though this is episodic television for the Orville, they are doing a lot of connective tissue here and laying pieces for the long game. Are you feeling that, Haley?
Definitely. I can definitely sense that, and hopefully that's what ends up being the case. I mean, it's hard to predict anymore with television. A show can have another season 1 minute and then the next not. So hopefully they will carry on further. And to a degree, I kind of like that it's a little more serious than it has been, which also loses a touch because the Orville was so different. It was the lighthearted, funny track that we didn't have, which we now have in 2 shows. Anyway, there's so much. But I do like that they're getting a little bit more serious with it, because I think you have to when you're encountering other alien races and species and things like that. And then given the fight that they had and this looming threat that's going on still, it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Kyle, they've done a great job referring to past episodes. We got the Mad Idolatry end of season 1 callback, obviously, from the last episode. And now we've got 2 callbacks to 2 episodes from season 1 and season 2. They are definitely playing the long game, and it's been doing a good job.
Yeah, they're definitely doing great with the callbacks. The only thing I worry about, obviously, Kevin, and we've had this discussion, is they're putting in these new pieces. And right now, we're not playing the long game with the Orville as far as what the future is. We're on a short game. Let's be honest here. We have no idea what the future is of the Orville, and I think most everybody's kind of in the mindset that this is probably it. And now we all hope that isn't the case, but under these circumstances, you're putting in these puzzle pieces where we've only got maybe 7 episodes left of the
10 episode season. Yeah, and we're on episode 4.
We only got 6 episodes, and even though I know these are running at extended episodes, this is a little concerning because there's some big things that they're laying the path for with a short time to lead up to it. So I'm curious to see how they're going to handle this, because at some point you've got to start addressing these puzzle pieces, or are you going to leave them to the land of wonderment? I mean, So I hope we get. I don't want to see it where we have this dangling plot thread, especially when it regards Ed's daughter, because I think that's a very important piece.
Agreed. All right, guys. Well, we're going to take a break here, and up after the break, we're going to continue, our discussion of Gently Falling Rain. We're going to talk some trivia, and then we're going to get into our away missions. Right back, and we'll see you on the other side. Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Blooded Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show, about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom. All right, welcome back to Union Federation, episode 135. We're discussing the Orville New Horizons, season 3, episode 4, Gently Falling Rain. We've got some episode trivia for you here. This episode was dedicated to Lisa Baines, who played Spiria Ballesk in this episode. However, she died in June 2021 after a traffic accident. Sad. At the beginning of this episode, the crew is in the simulator in an old Western saloon. I did notice this, by the way. Seth MacFarlane is wearing the same costume and hat he wore in A Million Ways to Die in the West. Very funny movie, by the way. Have you guys seen that, Kyle?
I have seen that. It's been a while since I watched it, but yeah, and of course, because of that movie, that's how we ended up with a certain Charlize Theron making a guest appearance on the Orville earlier on in its run.
Not just Charlize Theron, but also Liam Neeson, because he played the villain in that. Did you see that movie, Haley?
No, I didn't. I remember hearing about it, but I didn't watch it.
It's very funny. You should check it out.
Or maybe I did, and I just don't remember.
Ed says, battle plans are only perfect until the fighting starts. This paraphrases Prussian General Helmuth von Moltke the Elder. Variations of no plan survives contact with the enemy have been attributed to many leaders over the years. Even Mike Tyson weighed in with, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Tala Kiali is promoted to lieutenant commander, making her the first member of the Orville crew to receive a promotion since the first season. As such, the title sequence introduced its modified version only 3 episodes earlier, updating to reflect the character's new rank. The rank change actually appears in the opening titles before it is revealed in the body of the episode via dialogue and a uniform update. Spoiler alert! Bruce Boxleitner plays president of the Planetary Union. On Babylon 5, his character ends up similarly president of the Interstellar Alliance. And during the flight to Krill's surface, President Alcazan, his character says, "Night falls fast. Today is in the past." That is a quote from Looking for Alaska by John Green. And I was looking out for this, and I think I noticed it. At 31 minutes and 50 seconds in, there's a Krill in the audience who can be seen with their sleeves sliding down and human skin is showing. Uh-oh. All right, guys. I think that we need to get into a little away mission here. Away mission number 1. We actually get to visit the Krill homeworld for the first time. Your first impression, what'd you think of their culture, cities, etc.? Haley?
I was totally looking out for the Eye of Sauron. It wasn't there, thank goodness. No, it's really quite interesting to hear that they don't like the sun. It's very dark, which, given I guess 80 kilometers of cloud cover over your entire planet, would definitely do that. I suppose, sort of. Some sunlight's gotta get through, but it just doesn't apparently. Their city is really kind of cool. Reminds me of Stardust City Rag, kind of that island. It's dark, lots of lights, bright kind of thing. So that was really cool. And again, I think so much of what we saw in this episode so reflects religious fanaticism in our own country, and looking up to something and saying that you are right because of it. I'll stop myself there. Yeah. Anyway, other than that, I thought it was kind of neat. Their city really definitely looks really cool. I do like that.
Kyle, a little part from Michael Wynne Johnson's article touches on this. Quote, the latter half of this episode is almost perfectly balanced and oftentimes quite exciting. Even the Union delegation approaching the surface of Krill before the coup started. The scope of the episode is evident and epic. The musical score swells to John Williamson proportions, while the Krill homeworld itself has a strange dark beauty to it, reminiscent of Blade Runner. Seeing the capital city of Dalekos was an amazing way to build the Orville universe and give the episode a larger cinematic sense than television can offer. Thoughts?
Well, the Blade Runner thing hit home because that's what I was thinking when they were flying into the city and how it looked, and even though too we see a little bit of Earth, which we don't get to see a lot, and some of the massive cities there too. So that was it was very cool to see. Obviously, a lot of interesting things with the Krill culture. It's nice to know that not only did I grow up on Hoth, but I could have substituted for a Krill homeworld too. No, just very cool. Obviously, we've known about their religion and how that much affects, but it was interesting to see how they play their political games, putting out all these misinformation shot at the media.
Hold on. You're stepping on other notes here. Hold on. We'll get to that. I just wanted your thoughts on like the city and the look and everything.
Yeah. So Blade Runner thing. I also got a little bit of Coruscant feel from it.
Oh yeah. Okay. Definitely. I thought that cool. I thought that Krill like hover car was cool. It's just kind of going along in the background, and then you saw it used again. I thought that was very cool. Definitely Blade Runner-y. I liked it. Got Slytherin vibes big time. But I gotta tell you, the costumes for the Krill were fantastic. Talea's costume, that kind of cleric costume that we saw from Krill, that was like the Sazerac character in the red, was very cool. I thought that was really neat. Do you have another thought, Kyle?
I just want to say all the green kind of gave me a little bit of a Romulan vibe too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay. Speaking of the politics, Kyle, Union and Krill treaty is threatened. The politics mirror present day and past history political problems that lead to war and civil unrest. And their circle of clerics is like our electoral college. And trivia, the Krill's influence operations are similar to the increasingly common deep fake videos that often convincingly seem to portray actual people but are in fact fake. I want to talk about the political issue here, guys. Haley, let's start with you here. We did touch on it earlier. It was uncomfortable to watch, but hey, well done.
I was like, do you really want to start with me? No, I don't think it was uncomfortable. It was a little shocking to see it so blatantly. Like I said, other shows have touched on it, kind of been like, hey, like here's a little bit of like, this is what happened. But this, I mean, I was thinking, January 6th, and her speaking to the crowd, and it was almost like they're gonna go storm their Capitol building or whatever it was, and I just was like, oh, they went there. Well, good for them. And then later with the video thing, it was just like, yeah, that's a thing. It happens, and it's insane. And I would never say that both sides don't do that type of thing, but one side always tends to do it worse. And the fake actors, because it's just great. The phrases and things that I never thought would be a thing and then became a thing, and now I'm so sick of hearing them that I never want to hear them again, is incredible. So I truly appreciated for them taking that, what happened in the US, and just being like, yeah, we're going to do it. It's going to be aliens, but we're going to do it, because who's to say that an alien race wouldn't have something kind of similar happen on their home world? There's nothing to say that. And so I loved that they were like, yeah, we're going to use this and tell a story around it and say, hey, it doesn't have to be so bad. And so it's going to be really interesting, I think, from here on out. Do we get more of this story? Do they just kind of leave it and say, okay, this is what happened? Or are they going to kind of touch on it again? Because we still have this, are we going to try and make this treaty with Krill so that we can fight the Kazon together? Or are we going to be fighting two people? And so I'm really intrigued to see where they take it, because we saw what happened here and it's still not over. And it's still something that to this day, almost 2 years later, we're still fighting and trying to struggle with ourselves.
Well said. Well said. Kyle, I don't envy you, but can you follow that up?
Yeah. Trust me, I've been processing this since I watched the episode, because there's a lot of things that they hit on in this episode, obviously. I want to first and foremost start out with naivete, because look how naive the Krill Supreme Chancellor was at the beginning of the episode, thinking he was going to win the election. But not only that, we've had this same system for how many hundreds of thousands of years, and within the Krill, and it's always, this merchant system has always worked and everything like that. So you have that. Then you go to the Krill homeworld. Obviously, we have this new political faction that's coming up. That what's interesting is that, you know, they're playing on the purity of their race, focused on their religion, and then to have them have this, we see these deep fades, but we see it's common practice for both sides. And you have Mercer talking about, you can't tell what's fake and what's real. There's some of these that seem so real, yet you know. And then to have Talia win the election, and of course immediately the old Supreme Chancellor, we challenge this and everything like that. Then going to the scene with how they treat people who give up their children, let's just say, and the powerfulness of that scene. And again, I'm going to come back to this episode's timing. It comes out the day before the world gets turned upside down on this past Friday, the day that we're recording this, because we're recording this on June 25th. The world gets turned upside down, and I mean, they had no way of knowing that was coming, but we knew this kind of thing was in the mix. But again, what I give them credit for is this. It really felt like, even though they were definitely taking examples of what's going on in our political culture right now, they didn't have it just be one-sided. They addressed it, a lot of things that are happening, whether one side or the other. And I think the point of it was to make us think. And I'm hoping maybe that for some people who maybe don't want to turn on the news and deal with what's going on, they saw this episode and it at least made them think a little bit. And no matter how they come out of it, if they at least think about it and take a look at what's going on around us as a whole, through our world, I give them a lot of credit. It was a brave thing to do, and I think they handled it in about the best way possible that they could, considering how many different topics they hit within this episode.
Well said. Yeah. I can't really top those guys, but, you know, as I was watching this political intrigue play out, I just kept looking at current day stuff, looked at the recent election stuff, history, you know, stuff that's led to wars and assassinations, and seeing it play out through an alien race like this was brilliant with the writers to be able to do this. And Star Trek's been able to do that for years. And, you know, it's no secret that the Orville is influenced directly from Star Trek. And that's what makes us as Star Trek fans enjoy it as well. But, you know, seeing how they were able to bring back a fan favorite character, at least for me, I don't know how you guys feel about Talia, but for me, I was hoping that she was going to come back in one form or another. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting, but I love it, and I think it's great. And speaking of Talea, let's go ahead and head down to away mission number 2. All right, guys. Michaela McManus returns as Talea. And I'm going to read more of this article by Michael Wynne Johnson. Quote, suddenly and mysteriously, Mercer is led out of the imprisonment by 2 guards with no explanation. And when they seek through the streets of Dalakos, like the Krill version of rats, inexplicably again, Mercer is just as suddenly taken by a small faction of armed Krill. The guards that led him out there are killed in the street, and he is taken to a small underground building. While there, a small faction that opposes Talea revealed to Mercer that he and Talea have a daughter, an adorable half-human, half-Krill named Anaya. Talea has provided for the girl, but never visits, fearing the child will taint her image in the eyes of her rabid supporters. In one scene where McFarlane and McManus wasn't enough, the second scene after Mercer purposely goes back to be in prison again is absolutely brilliant, despite perhaps the logic of him going back to be re-imprisoned in the first place. The hidden emotions that both actors convey in that scene where Mercer confronts his former lover about their child is truly captivating. And McFarlane shows more dramatic chops in that one short scene that he's shown previously in his career. Talea even reveals that the name Anaya is the reason for the title of this episode, as it means gently falling rain. The writers should be extremely proud of this scene, as should McFarlane and McManus, as it shows the layer subtlety they are capable of, with both Talea and Mercer showing a great emotional range. The young girl, Anaya, is played by a young actress, Charlie Townsend. Plot twist, Talea and Ed Mercer have a daughter. I want to talk about this scene here, guys, because Mercer decides to go back to find out. He's escaped, basically, and he goes back to Talea, and she's like, why are you here? And he says, why did you let me escape? Why did you let me live? And she says, I don't want to see you killed, and I wanted to repay you for letting me go. And then he gets to the real reason, like, I've seen our daughter. And the fact that she says the child is not of pure blood would basically, embarrass her, and she would lose her power. And there's a very powerful scene there where he goes, then why did you have her? Why did you have her? And she replies saying, that's a very human thing of you to say. And I'm just going to say it, guys. Roe versus Wade was just overturned. We get to see a very heart-wrenching scene of what happens when a pregnancy in Krill is terminated. And they show a hologram as punishment to the parents of what their kid would have looked like. Gut-wrenching. But the scenes between Ed and Talea were just fantastic. And you can tell there is something there with Talea and her feelings towards Ed. I was blown away by this plot twist, but I absolutely loved it. And I just got sucked into the scenes of them together. And the article, the author of the article says this was Seth's probably best acting work ever. Kyle, thoughts?
So this was a huge twist, obviously. Addressing their daughter first. Let's start there, because that's a whole can of worms as far as the show goes, and as far as what this child does for the political climate on Krill and what it does for Talea. And I mean, too, I actually had to go look and make sure it was Michaela McManus coming back as Talea, because the personality change was so drastic from the last time we saw her. And then you go back and watch the episode, how much this character has changed from the first time we see her as this school teacher, very soft, very kind, to this hardened political activist, and what she's become. And then where she has had this daughter of mixed genetics now, and yet she hides her away because she doesn't want her political situation to be affected by it. But then we see at the end of the episode where she's watching the screen of her daughter. So obviously something that Ed has said or things that she's even felt, where she's bearing her own emotions because of her, I guess, quest for power, quest for her beliefs. She's bearing her emotions for her beliefs, and we see that with how she treats Ed. Initially, it's executing, but now she's she's going to release him, but not tell him. And so there's all this mixed things going on with Talia, and I think that's a very fascinating character development for this character. I think we're going to see Talia again before the season's over. The hologram scene, like you said, Kevin, absolutely heart-wrenching, even more so considering what's happened in our country in the last 48 hours. And how the cruel, in a way, it's cruel. It's very, very cruel because you're making these people live something that they didn't want to live, and you're forcing it on them. And there's nothing more cruel than forcing something on people, especially when you're involving children. No matter the reason, when you involve children, the cruelty as a punishment, the cruelty level just goes up through the roof, and it tells you how what just how far to a direction the Krill is, and where they're at. And it's so powerful. And I agree, it's some of Seth MacFarlane's best acting work. And it goes back to what I was saying though earlier. It makes you stop and think, and it makes you stop. And if this episode accomplishes you making you stop and think, it's done something. If you're one of these people who watches this episode and just throws your remote in disgust and saying, I'm not watching this show anymore because of what it did, you're missing the point. And we need to think. We need to be a people who think. And I think that's so important. And I think that this episode especially beautifully handled it. But the show has handled these situations so well in a way that should make you be thinking. And if you're turning your brain off because of this, you're doing yourself a disservice. And it's so powerful. And to see this, Kevin, I gotta say, to see this sweet young innocent child and beautifully acted, yet again another amazing young actor in a science fiction show. We've just had everything with the young actress who's played Obi-Wan, Princess Leia, and Obi-Wan, and this young actress who just melts your heart when she's talking to Ed. And how Seth MacFarlane is so soft and sweet to her. And it was heart-wrenching. It was one of those things where after this episode, I stopped and had to catch my breath because of what happened, especially with that. And kudos to the writers, but more kudos to the actors for doing it in a way that was emotional, powerful, but not, oh, we're gonna say what's right and what's wrong. We're just gonna make you think about it.
You know, Kyle, you said something that about taking time to think and think for yourself, and thinking if, is this the right thing that this person's saying? And that when Talia was giving her speeches, it came across as mob mentality and preaching and preaching to people's fears and anger. And unfortunately, we've seen that recently in recent elections. And Haley, I don't know where you want to begin with this, so I'm just going to let you decide to pick and choose, because there's a lot to chew on here, and I don't want to pressure you into anything you don't want to talk about. But Kyle, that was well said. Yeah.
So as far as the episode goes, I really enjoyed these scenes with them together. And I agree with the review of I outside of the Orville, I don't know Seth MacFarlane's stuff. It's not that I'm not a fan of him. The things that he's been in is not my thing, and so I haven't watched him. So to that I can't speak, but I do think the emotions from both of them were portrayed very, very well. I think they did a really fantastic job. Seth did a wonderful job of, finding out he's a dad. I mean, like seeing him learn that he's got this kid, and then, his interaction with her. I mean, he handled it incredible. And then going in and talking to Talia about it and saying, how could you not tell me? But on the same side, totally get it, you know, like, so that kind of stuff. But I do think it was acted very, very well. To speak to everything else, uh, especially given everything and being a woman in this country, that has happened, it's really incredible to see that, you know, they would throw this in, that this other race would have kind of something similar. I mean, it's hard to say, you know, it's like anthropomorphizing and putting human characteristics and qualities to inanimate objects or animals that don't have those things. So it's humanist to say, oh, if we encountered an alien species, they would also be, you know, pro-life. So it's really interesting. I get maybe kind of where they were coming from, because even a couple of years ago, I mean, it's been a hot topic for a long time coming. And so I can understand why they threw this in. So it's understandable that they would say, here's this alien culture that we've encountered, and they have some similar qualities to us. Because we don't know, obviously, for actual experience. We have no actual experience to call from to say that they would or not. And so to speak to that, when he's asking, you know, her why she decided to keep it, knowing that it was going to be born this way, and her saying, well, I basically had no choice, and now I have to hide her away because I'm political. And who knows, maybe she always was, and she just hid it really, really well. Maybe she went back to her home planet and became radicalized. We don't know exactly where that fell for her, but for her to continue to have a child that she knew was going to be part human and not come out exactly Krill is an interesting story. That they shame and guilt parents, really, from a perspective of working in the field that I work in, really, really, really just does not sit well with me, because it happens. There's plenty of states in this country that when a woman goes to get an abortion and she talks to them about it, there are states that have laws that say she has to have an ultrasound first. And that's shaming her and guilting her into keeping something that they don't know exactly why she can't, or the circumstances that this child came to be. And those people, this couple in the episode, and women in this country, are going to live with that anyway. And so forcing that upon them really, really just really pisses me off. It's not okay. Simply because that's going to be something they're going to live with for the rest of their lives. And so you don't need to force that on them. And you don't know the circumstances of everybody. So you don't understand if someone can have a kid. You know, my state in 30 days will have its own complete ban on abortion. And the only exceptions are rape or incest. And it's only if you report to police. Well, how many people do that? Yeah. Not very many women report those types of things, because they're already feeling guilt and shame on themselves that they've put on themselves for that situation, because they must have done something. And so to force someone to say, a child at probably, like, I would say that kid was probably maybe like 7 or 8, right? Because that's a good age, because they can vocalize and they're cute, and you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That was probably the only part of the episode that really just kind of got to me, because we have that already, and people will already feel that way, and forcing them to feel it even worse is just more damaging and more traumatizing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well said. Really well said, Ailey. Kyle, you had a thought?
Yeah, I want to throw this in because I think it's important too, and listening to both of you speak so eloquently, Kevin, we talked about this when we first started about non-politics on the Fandom Podcast Network. Obviously, we are in this very unique situation where fandom and politics have just really crossed, and it's in a very powerful moment within the politics of our country. And I see so much, and I can't opinion on anything because I'm not certain things. I am who I am, and I can't control the things, certain aspects of who I am, but I can control my view and how I feel. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. But one of the things, Kevin, that you brought up in this conversation that I think is so important right now is you were talking about how Talia was getting mob mentality going.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look around and see our landscape, that's one of the things I'm so fearful of is mob mentality. On no matter what side you're on, we are so busy, and it even reflects in this episode, trying to out yell each other, and we're not listening to each other.
Yeah.
And we are not. We're so in this land of, Kevin, I'll compare it to fandom. We are on the dark side because everything is on either side has to be an absolute. We have lost the ability to use common sense, to talk, to learn from each other, to compromise. We might not agree on everything, but there's some basic common sense that we've lost over these last couple of decades, I'll even say. We need to all shut up. Excuse me. And just listen to the quiet and think and talk, not yell, but talk, because we all come from different backgrounds. We all come from different areas, but there's just basic common sense. And if we use that, and if we stop saying it has to be this or this, and you must agree with me and absolutely, or you're against me, or you must agree with me here absolutely, or you're against me. We've got to learn to listen, to communicate, and to respect. And I don't know what the answer is to that, but I just I felt that way very strongly after watching this episode. That's, you are so wrapped up in your own feelings and your own beliefs that there's nothing else. And that's not how it works. And we are making choices and we are doing damages, and we're not thinking about the full capacity of what it is. It's just about the way one person thinks. And I think we've got to change that. And I see it in fandom. I see it in fandom with how people discuss shows and everything like that. So it's so important. Take a moment, catch your breath. I know there are a lot of people who are enraged right now. They're sick of it. They're everything. But there's a way to deal with it that's constructive. Stop, catch your breath, and be constructive. Don't be destructive.
Well said. Well said. You're right on there, Kyle. It seems that at the end of the episode, the existence of their daughter, Anaya, and this is going to be interesting. Anaya looks to be used as, I guess, sort of a pawn as a plan to stop Talia from threatening war against the Union and maybe possibly rebuild and save the peace treaty. So I guess we will see what happens regarding that. I was kind of curious to see, how the existence of his daughter was going to come to fruition or not. And apparently there was, he was very forthright about that. And Admiral Halsey had brought it up towards the end there. But I want to end this on a positive note here because Charlie Townsend, who plays Anaya, the Krill girl, was absolutely wonderful in this episode. I thought she was just an adorable little Krill girl. When I looked her up on IMDb, do yourself a favor and check out her Buzz. There's a BuzzFeed video dated 2017 that was, I think, put on by her, I want to say, I guess, acting people. I guess they're agents or whatever. And there's a really cute scene there, like a demo reel, basically. And she's just adorable. And she's been very busy. She has 10 acting credits already. She's done voices for the recent Muppet Babies, where she played the voice of Rosie Bear in Rosie, and also the Tots animated series, where she plays Mia and Mia Orange Kitten. Getting some early voice work in. This is great. And she also was in a couple of episodes of LA's Finest, which was the spin-off series from the character that was in Bad Boys 2, Kyle,
Mhm.
played by
Gabrielle Union,
Gabrielle Union and co-starring
Jessica Alba.
Jessica Alba. Thank you very much. I was trying to remember her name. So she's obviously done some live acting stuff as well, but and she was also in the Runaways TV series. She played toddler Leslie Eller. So good for her. I'm really excited to see what's to become of Charlie Townsend because she was great in this episode, and this demo reel that's on her IMDb is just absolutely adorable. I highly recommend that you check that out. So, guys, as we wrap this up here, do you have any other comments or reactions to this week's episode, Haley?
I'll end it on a higher positive note. The railing on the building, I was like, that's a little short. People could topple over and get all really bad. And then are they using that 3D like the screen as well, like a lot of their shows are?
Yeah, like the volume type thing. I'm sure
Yeah.
that that is becoming a thing.
Anyway,
Yeah.
much like Kyle's lens flare going on, the lighting at the end when Mercer and Grayson are talking, the lighting was just kind of weird. It was just a little off, and I was like, all right, you could have done better with the lighting. I get that they were trying to mimic like the sun coming up because she asks him to go eat breakfast, but it definitely looked over processed and definitely like they were trying to make it too much like the sun's coming up because it was just off a little bit. Yeah. That's all I got.
Kyle, any comments or reactions to this week's episode?
Like I said at the opening, this is probably my favorite episode of this season of the Orville for a lot of reasons, and we've talked about them, both the heavy side and the fun side of this. One of the things I really liked too at the ending of this episode was the fact that they did something that I thought was a great touch, was the fact that the president had General Halsey tell Ed, what happens with your daughter is your choice. We're not going to. And I think that was a great moment. And I think that's a positive moment because there's a lot of government a lot of situations with like that where they wouldn't care. They would just use the child as a tool. And I think that's a great moment there. And I think it made the episode end on a very high note and a very quality note there. So, overall, wonderful episode, beautiful effects, great balance. We got a little bit of every character in this episode, which made me happy too. Everybody got a little bit of a moment in there. I know we've talked about that as well. I'm hoping this is like season 1 of the Orville would after episode 3, where it really started finding its stride. I hope this episode is the episode where the Orville really, in this New Horizons, finds its stride for the rest of the season.
Well said. Yeah, I'm just fascinated to find out how Ed is going to deal with this. You know, he has a daughter. And is him and Talia going to come to a peaceful union here? Whether they, see each other on a regular basis, or their daughter gets to come on the Orville and actually know who Ed is. Because Ed didn't say that in the episode. He didn't say, "I'm your father," and which I thought was a smart move to do. But I love this addition to the story. This is just fascinating, and this is great science fiction writing, and I'm really, really excited about it. So, all right, guys. Yeah.
Can I throw out my Orb of Prophecy just real quick?
Yeah, sure. We haven't gotten there yet, but sure.
No. As far as what could happen with Ed's child.
Okay.
I could easily see an episode where the Orville rescues some kind of shuttle, and it's either the nanny character or another character with Ed's child they've been escaping from that situation and finding the Orville. I could see that playing out.
Okay. All right. Haley, you're thinking about that. What do you think?
I mean, definitely a possibility, or maybe not necessarily that they've escaped, but maybe Talia realizes that, yes, she's got this political ambition and she's got a choice to make. Does she stick with it? Or does she say, hey, I was wrong? Which, I mean, let's be honest, people in that position don't tend to say they're wrong. Hint, hint, orange face. And so does she say that she's wrong and she says, "Hey, look, I have this daughter," and try to make peace? Or maybe she's the one who says, I can't choose a different path. I'm on this path and I'm staying on it." And maybe she lets her daughter go. I could see that happening.
I would love to see Ed and Talea reconcile somehow. I think that would be great. And really cement this peace treaty with them, because I think having the Krill, I like that things have changed and threatened it, but I'd like to see this not drag on too long, because they need the Krill for help with the Kalon. So hopefully we'll see that happening. I'm not sure if we'll get it, but I hope that we do. All right, guys, let's go ahead and let's get on out of here. We hope you guys have enjoyed our discussion of episode 135 of Union Federation, discussing Orville Gently Falling Rain. But let's open up those hailing frequencies. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network Union Federation on the Subspace channels. First of all, subscribe to our YouTube channel on the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel, and you'll get notifications and for upcoming live events as well. But we have a lot of our shows going directly to YouTube as well, so please check that out. And also subscribe and give us a like. We'd really much appreciate it. Our master feed for all of our audio podcasts can be found at fpnet.podbean.com. And please join our Union Federation Podcast Facebook group, talking Orville and Star Trek. Union Federation is also on Twitter and Instagram. You can also email us at theunionfederation@gmail.com. My name is Kevin Reitzel. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix. Kyle, where can we find you?
On Twitter at AKyleW, or on Instagram at AKyleFandom.
Awesome. And Haley, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Trekkie01D.
Awesome. And Amy, who will return next week, hopefully. She's on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson. And also, please, we have joined up with her BQN. Twitter and Instagram for that is at BQN Podcast. And also check out the BQN Collective Facebook group, the listeners group. But let's look into that Orb of Prophecy, guys. Tomorrow on our recorder, we'll be discussing episode 8 of Strange New Worlds. And that's the Elysian Kingdom. And then next week, we have episode 9. Only got 2 more episodes, 9 and 10. And 9 is called All Those Who Wander. And then, of course, we have the Orville next week's episode. Episode 5 is called The Tale of Two Topas. Haley, you haven't been on for a little while. What have been your thoughts on Strange New Worlds?
So
do we have enough time to talk about that?
Yes, because I'm like 3 weeks behind and I haven't watched it because the episode dropped the day after I was in sick bay again. So I haven't watched it. So I have like 3 or 4 episodes to watch. So I'll let you know next time.
Okay, cool. I'm very, very curious. Very curious. So, Haley, thank you so much. It was so nice to have you come back, and we're glad that you're back.
Yes, it was so wonderful. Thank you.
Kyle, as always, sir, thank you so much.
Yeah, I just have to echo we missed you, Sestra, and it's always wonderful to have you back and feeling better on the Union Federation podcast. And thank you guys for an outstanding episode and going a path we normally don't go here on Fandom Podcast Network shows, but I think it was well worth the discussion.
Well said, Kyle. Well said. All right, guys, we're going to warp on out of here. Goodbye, everyone. Hailing frequencies are now closed.